South American rock art became universal. The rock art across South America is similar and has the same subjects. There are also similarities with North America and with Eurasia, etc. So there is very little chance that the same artists or class of artists traveled to produce the artifacts. The multitude of capable artists indicates a profound and long-term system of global roots. We can detect evidence of what role or function each strategic location fulfilled in this global system. For instance, in almost any strategic place, even deep in the continent, and even deep in the Amazon forest, you can see evidence they produced and butchered megafauna, probably mostly for fatty meat, and these strategic places were connected and crossed over oceans, while practicing whale hunting. Again, kind of megafauna, with several extinct before modern times, during and in between crossings. There is evidence they crossed with fleets of ocean-worthy ships, to increase security and make handling etc. more efficient. Megalithic signs and inscriptions with a local and broader function in the larger global economy. Signs picture the global economy. Pedra do Inga is one megalithic artifact, Itacoatiara in Brazil, in a network of hundreds of strategic places which shows the local and global activities. Pedra do Inga is one of more artifacts that present a spatial depiction of the larger interoceanic culture and economy. Things related to whales, ships and navigation are depicted in the sea part, on the side of the river draining in the sea. Productive and economically important, domesticated animals are depicted on the land part, on the side away from the sea. The transition zone between ocean and productive land shows the ships close to each other, and with their sails down, anchored with thick woven cords in the ports. The earthly matters, human-related, are depicted below a pointed horizontal line at the height of a person. Spiritual and cosmic matters. Navigation with stars and/or constellations are above that pointed line. What differs between the locations is the megafauna. Whales in common even deep inland, and economically important. Domesticated animals. Portuguese and Spanish would go to extremes to eliminate or somehow replace and/or absorb what represented something global, highly organized and/or presenting spiritual aspects, international language and symbols. Portuguese and Spanish themselves could not present something equal, something as organized and advanced. Further, we modern humans with all our technology still can't. Maybe that is one of the reasons we deny all this evidence. Possibly, apart from the multitude of places, evidence and variations, we struggle to discover and recognize what is spread out before our eyes all over the world, because we feel better or safer denying it, and full-blown disbelieving it, and or not taking the risk of being doubted by our peers. But we can discover and recognize, and if we want to go on existing we must discover and recognize, and this at no significant cost and while thriving as never before, or in fact as before when we were global and without divisions, at least without the spatial divisions by frontiers. And at the time the people of all classes seem to have thought it was right, because we deduce there would have been no way to repress uprisings. Everything would get around the world. Arctic mammoth tusks would get into the tropics. And obsidian from the tropics would get in the Arctic. The fatty meat of megafauna would serve on the ships while crossing the oceans. Hybridizations. And now we get to something interesting. We claim that megafauna, archaics, and even modern humans, and that includes ourselves, were hybridized during this global period, and this was at least till after the Younger Dryas or Neolithic Revolution, agriculture. But it was around that time that things would become unsustainable and prepare the coming collapse. So the giant slot was a hybridized by the humans, because this way the humans could hold fresh quite a lot of fatty meat. And some more products. A giant slot had a very low metabolism, especially while in captivation. It is kind of the ideal industrial size freezer with low consumption and cost. They could keep whole herds of them in strategic places. If necessary, they could herd or pasteurize these animals. And importantly, giant slots etc. were human-made and taken care of. So when the global system fell apart, they were no longer made nor taken care of, and would go extinct. They had no chance to survive on their own, because they never were wild animals, and would be outcompeted or be killed by predators. That is why they at least in one case seem to have drowned in their own poop. At least so if they had remained in captivity without care, or definitively killed and extinct in kill sites. In the few cases that giant slots had made marks with their claws in tunnels, supposedly carved by themselves, this would be so because they were held captive in these tunnels and made efforts to escape. The same for Clovis people. If Clovis had been independent hunter-gatherers, why would there have existed caches of Clovis tools? And why were the Clovis spear point not effective or too fragile for hunting? What we understand is caches or deposits were discovered with more primitive stone tools, by us supposed to be made by, and for Neanderthals or less developed humans, that did not serve well hunting or gathering either. Just like the Clovis tools. Why were caches discovered that were never used and or hidden covered in ochre, which is something culturally related to the more developed Amerinds and Indo-European cultures?